Welcome to the Safety to Go tutorial on completing your hazard assessment. In this video, I will walk you through the process for completing a hazard assessment that will pass your audit. Our hazard assessment forms are designed as a step-by-step process, making it easy for those of you who hate filling out paperwork. We make sure our forms are accessible and can be read by those with a 6th grade education or higher. There are 3 steps to a core compliant hazard assessment. The first is a job inventory, where you break down every job within your company by their task or duty. Then you move into the formal hazard assessment, identifying all the hazards associated with those duties. And then finally, you create a critical task list based on the risk involved with each duty. Let's get started on your tutorial. Before we begin, I'm going to go over some vocabulary and terms that we will be using throughout this tutorial video and going through some of the categories and hazard types that we discuss. So first is the controls. There are a few different types of controls you can put in place to reduce the risk involved with the hazards on the work site. This could be administrative controls such as safe work practices, safe job procedures, occupational health and safety management systems, training, orientation, practice procedures, rules, regulations, having signs and posters up, information cards, warnings, tags, giving clear instructions, making sure that there's clear communication on the work site, completing things such as hazard assessments, making sure MSDSs are available, manufacturer's instructions are available, and that sort of thing. The other thing that you want to ensure you have in place is proper PPE. This is personal protective equipment. And these could range from hard hats, safety glasses, face shields, face masks, gloves, coveralls, aprons, steel-toed boots, etc., depending on, again, the type of work that you are doing. Other things could also include safety equipment. This is fire extinguishers, first aid kits, flags, flares, pylons, reflectors, safety vests, warning triangles, those kinds of things. The next thing that I want to go over is the hazard category. So there are 2 hazard categories. There is safety, which is immediately harmful, such as a cut, a broken bone. And then there is health. So we will symbolize this by H. We will symbolize safety with S. Health is longer term issues, things that will take longer to show up, such as possibly chemicals causing disease, lung issues, hearing issues. If you're in a environment where you are around machines a lot, this could cause long-term hearing issues. And then finally, we have hazard types. So there are 4 main hazard types. There's physical, which we will symbolize by PH. This is things such as falling, cuts, burns, abrasions, heavy lifting, being struck by objects, vertical place, and pinch points, cramped workplaces, improperly adjusted equipment, furniture, repetitive tasks, vibration, extreme temperatures, noise, air quality, things such as that. Chemical, this will be identified as CH. This includes fumes, gases, vapors, aerosols, anything or any products that are acute or chronic toxins which are ingested, inhaled, absorbed, or injected. Then there is biological hazards. It will be symbolized by BI. These could be anything specific: bacteria, viruses, molds, fungus, body fluids, sewage, anything like that. And then finally is psychological or mental ability. This will be symbolized by PS in your hazard assessment, such as violence, harassment, bullying, stress, fatigue, boredom, personal stress, any effects of shift work, misconduct, and competence. The first step within your hazard assessment is the job inventory. This is where you list every job within your company, and then from there, you break down each job by task and duty. So for example, if you are a roofing company, you would list the different jobs within your company. So for example, you might have a rooftop position, you might have a driving or road position, and I am going to just leave a few spaces here, and an office position. So from there, as I had mentioned, you are then going to break down each job into its different tasks and more specific job duties. So for example, you might have a torching task for rooftop work, a cutting old roof task. So again, you are going to put that in there. Mopping old tar would be something that you do in your rooftop work. Loading the roof is another job, duty, or task that you are completing. Gluing materials, snow removal, etc. So you are going to be very specific in all of the jobs that you are doing. For example, road work would include driving to and from location. So you would put driving. Office work generally includes administration. You could put even more specifically in here, working on the computer, answering phones, dealing with customers in person, working with others, etc. So again, each one of these is breaking it down and being extremely specific in the tasks that you are doing. So administration is still fairly broad. That is why I broke it down to working on computers, answering phones, dealing with customers in person, working with others. So each of these can have its own hazards and risks associated within those job duties. So again, you want to be as specific as possible. From there, you're going to list the different equipment and tools that are used for each job. So for again, we go back up, and torching, you would use such as propane, a torch, trowel, knife, measuring tape, T-square, caulk line, and roller. But for cutting old roof, you might use something such as a shovel, axes, brooms, roof cutter, and wheel. So again, because each task and duty you're using different tools, there's different risks and hazards associated with each job. And so you need to be very specific when listing your jobs and making your job inventory. Is the formal hazard assessment form. This is where you are going to get more specific and identify the exact risks associated with each job duty by further breaking it down step by step how to perform each job. So you're going to start by stating the position. So I put rooftop, cutting old roof. Again, very specific based on the duty, not just the overall job. And you'll see why in a moment. Then you're going to state the date it was created and also state your own name here, so that everyone knows who completed the hazard assessment. Then you're going to go down here, and as I had mentioned, you're going to break it down even further. So it's going to be step by step how you complete cutting old roof. So the first example, first step would be with roof cutter with 3-sided blade. Again, being very specific, make out the size of roof that you are going to cut. From here, you are then going to identify the risks involved with this specific job. It could be that hazard associated with this one could be rocks flying out of roof cutter and contact with blade. So rocks flying out, making contact with that blade could result in a safety hazard. Again, this is a more immediate rather than a long-term injury or hazard type. So that is why I'm putting S there. And then for hazard type, this would be, again, is it physical, biological, chemical, or psychological? This type of hazard would most likely result in a physical injury. So, such as a rock hitting and flying at your eyes, or making contact and breaking the skin, resulting in a cut, bruise, injury, for example. So, again, that's a physical injury. From there, you are going to identify the level of risk that this might have within your company, specifically within your company, not just overall. Each hazard may be different for each company. This is why each company has to do their own risk assessment. So the consequence of severity, what is the consequences of this? What is the level of risk involved? So we're going to say it's about a 2. The frequency of this task, so how often are you performing this task in any given day, that's going to be probably a bit higher. So you're doing this almost every day, which means that it is at a little bit higher frequency. So you're doing it daily rather than say monthly or weekly. And so then we're going to see, okay, again, we said a 2 for the S, the consequences of severity. So this is because there's slight damage, minor loss, non-reportable injury. So again, if you get hit by a flying rock, depending on, again, the level of severity of the injury, it's unlikely that it's going to cause a severe injury, but it still could cause minor damage. And then you go into the risk. So what is the level of risk then? The probability that this is going to happen, and the score. So I would say based on both the 2 and the 4, that would be a 6. As you are adding the 2 together, come up with the overall total. Then you move into the control measures. First, you will state the type of control as we went over previously. So this one is an engineering control, and this is because it is something that you can do that with the machine or equipment that you are using, not necessarily an administrative control, which is usually paperwork, usually has to be approved by a executive, that kind of thing, or an administrator. So that is why we're saying it is an engineering control. And then we go into more detail within the controls we are using to reduce the risk involved. So for this one in particular, we are going to say that if you are not the operator cutting the roof, then you should be staying behind that operator so as to avoid any debris that could be coming off of the cutter. Make sure that the cutter is clean before every use, and make sure this means it is clearing from any debris, that kind of thing, as well. You are all wearing proper PPE as well. And this one would be really its own control and would be a PPE control measure rather than an engineering. From there, you move into the next hazard type. As I had mentioned earlier, you want to cut it down by step, but also by hazard, because each hazard could have a different rating, such as severity or consequence, which would increase the total hazard rating here. So for this one, we would say that the next type of hazard would be a possible fire in the muffler. So again, this one might still be an immediate safety hazard. It could still result in a physical type of risk, but instead of a more mild severity, it could be more severe, such as a level 3, though the frequency would be the same. So this one would result in an overall rating of 7. Now, as you go through every single job and every single hazard, this will eventually give you a great list of the different control measures as well as the step-by-step tasks, resulting in a list that you can then use for your safe job procedures. Therefore, you are kind of killing two birds with one stone, 2 documents. You just copy the control measures as well as the job tasks, steps, and you have your safe job procedures as well. So again, you go through every single one and ensure that you are being as specific as possible about the control measures and hazards for each job type. Once you have completed and have a general idea of the overall risk involved for each task, you will come up with a total from the total risk of each job duty, which will give you a number. For this job, for example, it is a 98, which is fairly high. This means that you will need to have many controls in place to ensure that the risk is lowered from highly unacceptable risk to a more moderate and low risk. Once you have completed all of the job duties, you will be able to come here to the next step, which is the critical task list. And as I had said, once I completed it, it was about a 98 for the cutting old roof. So again, that is a fairly high risk level, which would put it at the very top of our critical task list, compared to, say, driving or office work, which would be comparatively lower. So for your critical task list, you are ranking each job and task duty by the risk level, so that you have an idea of which jobs are your most dangerous and need to have controls in place to ensure that your employees are safe.